Hello and welcome to a new series where I'm going to be playing Darkest Dungeon. And I hope that you have a good time because this game is, for those of you who don't know, is pretty similar to XCOM, but it's like 2D. So it's something that I very much enjoy. And I've had like 20 hours of play on my main thing. I haven't beaten the game, not beaten the game, but I do know how it ends, but it's a good time. But we will be starting with a new uh, playthrough, and we will be playing with these DLC, all the DLCs, and um, actually we'll play maybe without the Crimson Court. Yeah, okay, because I'm not super good at the game, and as a result, uh, I'm more challenging than Radiant mode. Um, I would normally play on Radiant mode, but I'll go with Darkest. You know, a regular. Uh, okay, so let's do YouTube. That's not how you spell YouTube. Series. Okay, there we go. YouTube series. Let's enable mods. I have a lot of mods here. I'm going to enable all of them. Most, some of them are cosmetic, some of them actually change the game. I just, since probably a fair amount of people have either seen this game or know what it's about and or have played it, because if you were interested in any of the other games I've played, you probably have seen somebody play this. I thought maybe some mods. A lot of like those ones at the bottom here are just like retextures and like stuff to make it a little different for people who've already seen the game. And the stuff at the top, it all comes from one collection on the except for that one. From here down to here, it comes from one collection. It's the most subscribed collection on the whatchamacallit, the workshop on the Steam page for Darkest Dungeon, and it's all by this guy named Marvin Co. I don't know who he is or what kind of mods he makes, but it seems like people like what these mods do to the game, so they have more classes, more just change it up to the game to make it a little more fresh, give people a little more options for playstyles and stuff. Okay. Okay, yeah. And normally I do not play with mods at all. But as you can see, this one is mod installed, this one does not. Let's start it up. And there's an opening cinematic, but it's not super important. Essentially, there's an old rich man who I think is related to you,
along the old road.
who lived in this manor.
Troubling serpent-like
Okay, you got it.
through the
Yeah.
corrupted countryside, leading only, I fear, to ever more tenebrous places. There is a sickness in the ancient pitted cobbles of the old road, and on its writhing path you will face viciousness, violence, and perhaps other damnably transcendent terrors. So steel yourself, and remember there can be no bravery without madness. The old road will take you to hell, but in that gaping abyss, we will find our redemption.
Okay, so essentially the story is that, well, this is just the tutorial, but the overarching story is that our uncle was in a manor and he sent a letter to us because something happened. Oh god. Oh shoot, one sec. I don't know what happened there. For some reason the game just went all weird. Okay. Oh, it's the scaling issue. Okay. One sec. I'm gonna take a quick second. Don't worry. Even though you might not see, even though you just see the game, I am changing some stuff. Oh god. Option. Oh no. I want to go to options. Graphics. Okay. Full screen. Full screen. Restart game. Oh god. Okay, well, you know, we'll just leave it. I'm sorry, but the first episode's gonna have to have the issues. That is highly unfortunate. Okay. Settings. Alright. I had fixed it, but then I guess it didn't like the fix for this game. Yeah, okay. So now the mouse cursor is going to be a little bit off. Well, essentially, story-wise, Uncle calls us out, whatever happens. But here's the interface. Essentially, here's our inventory. Here we can also toggle it between looking at a map. Normally the map has like rooms with like little hallways in between them. And in a room you can have an interactable object, a fight, what have you, and in between, for each one of these dots, there could be nothing. There also could be an interactable object or a fight or a trap or many manner of things. And over here on the left, this is the essentially player panel, or the panel for like each individual character we have. And here are their actions they can take on the turn. Here are their currently equipped items, or their weapons. And you can put items here up to 2. And on the left here you can see some stats, some health, and a thing right here. This should be sanity, which is denoted by these little empty boxes right here below the health. And for every 10 sanity, one of these boxes fills up. And when they go to 100, they essentially either break down and get a huge negative debuff, or they essentially fight being stressed out and they like win against it, and they get like a huge buff to them. And but usually it's bad, so you usually don't want to go to too high of stress. And stress happens by doing a fight. There are enemies that can either deal stress attacks to you specifically, so they're damaging your stress instead of your health, or if an enemy crits you, you also gain stress, or sometimes you randomly gain stress. And for these icons right here, they essentially say what they do. So if they're melee or if they're ranged, they tell that. And those little dots right there are essentially, you can have up to 4 positions here, so I can like swap these people around if I want to. And they can have up to 4. Currently I only have 2 since it's the tutorial, but essentially these say what, like the tan colored, the yellowish ones, are what position I can activate these on. So he has to be in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, but not the 4th, since there are 3 dots there. And I can attack the first 2 positions of the enemy side. So we have up to 4 slots, they have up to 4 slots. And if there's a line in between the dots, that means it affects several enemies. It's an area effect attack. But if it's just individual dots with no line in between them, it doesn't affect them. And if there's no enemy thing, that means it doesn't damage anything. It only affects teammates. So like this, it can only be used on self. It marks myself and buffs myself. So, let's just get into some playing around. Oh, also there's a torch. Essentially, as you walk, your torch goes down, starts at 100, all the way down to 0. And the more light you have, the easier things are. But if you go down in light level, the things get harder. So like your enemies' accuracy, your enemy crit chance, the amount of enemies, the amount of stress damage you take goes up. But if you go down like far enough, you get higher and higher amounts of loot. So essentially it's like a risk versus reward type thing. Also, there are items that are like, oh, if your light's above a certain amount, you deal a certain amount of you do more damage, or if your light's below a certain amount, you get more damage. So essentially lets you fit your playstyle as you would like.
Brigand Titans have run up these lanes. Keep to the side path. The hamlet is just ahead.
Yeah, so essentially we're walking along, and here, okay, yeah, first enemy. Ooh, we got surprised.
That all may hear of your arrival.
Yeah, so essentially turn-based combat. Click on the hero to click a skill icon, then click on the highlighted enemy. If you can't select a particular skill, it's because the hero needs to be standing in a different spot. That's what we're talking about with those dots. Or there are no valid targets, mouse over in the skill to see the requirements. So essentially, we got surprised there, which is at the beginning of each combat, there's a roll for surprise. And if you are surprised, your units are shuffled around. If the enemy's surprised, they get stunned for a round, or like they can't activate. So you get all of your units get to move first, and then they get to have their turn. But normally, movement, like when stuff happens in combat, is based off of speed. So like the person with the highest speed goes first, and the second highest, and third highest, and that it bounces back and forth. Well, what I mean by that is, like, if the first highest is on my team, we go, and the second highest on their team, they go. Or if it's first and second on our, like, overall our team has it, then we go first and second on our team. So it's only determined by speed. So I'm gonna attack here. He has some abilities, but I don't know them yet because I haven't seen them. So the more you get to know your enemies, the more skills you get to see out of them. But he also has some resistances. So like resistance, stun, blight, bleed, debuff, and move. So some abilities will try to stun the enemy, some will try to blight them, some will bleed them, some will put a debuff onto them, and some will try to move them and move their position, so shuffle them around kind of thing. And each one has a certain percentage chance. So this one, if you look down to like the second or third, fourth row, depending on where you want to start counting, it says bleed 100% base, and 2 points of damage per round for 3 rounds. And it also has a chance to debuff the target to have them minus 20% bleed resist. With 100% base, that means that there's normally a 100% chance to debuff them, and minus 1 speed with 100% chance to normally debuff. But he has a debuff percentage of 15, so that means it's only going to be 85% chance to debuff them, and his bleed resist to 20%, so we're only going to be able to have an 80% chance to bleed him. Might as well go for it, because we don't have much else to do. We could move, we could skip our turn, but that's usually not the best thing to do. This has a essentially has a base accuracy of 90%, a damage modifier. Essentially, damage modifier just means that this action modifies this amount of damage. So the normal amount is like a regular strike kind of thing, like this action. But this one has a damage modifier of minus 40%. But that's because it hits 2 units. And this one is like a minus 50% because it has a chance to stun. So the whole point is that they're all working off this damage range. So in order to do that, if ability does other things, it has to essentially balance that by doing less damage. So we're going to try to stun. Okay, well that didn't work. So he's able to attack us. But we dodged it, that's good. So we have a dodge percentage of 14. And he has an attack, I can't see the shank thing. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. We're just gonna try to attack him again. Kill them. Yeah.
Give them no quarter.
Loot. Yeah, you get loot. Essentially, at the end of every round, there would be several things here. Normally, now it's just one, and we can take all. We can close it if we don't want to take any, or if we don't have the room to. Also, this is sort of redundant. 750 gold. It says value 750 gold. Yeah, whatever. I'll switch him around because normally he likes to be in front, because he can actually he can only use one ability in the front row, so he likes to be in second or further back. So we will continue walking. WASD. Oh, and here's an item. Interactable object. And normally, when you have an interactable object, you can use an item on it. So let's say if there was like you were in an area and you came up to an interactable object, which was like a feast had happened, and there was like a table cleared out with food. If you ate it normally, there might be like a percentage chance to like get like poisoned or something. Well, if you had like an antivenom in your inventory, you can use it on that table, and then it'll always guarantee you get like a good option. that's a very simple example. There's a lot more like there's a lot more to it than that. There's some things that aren't necessarily intuitive, but it will tell you like every time you use one, and you come back to that same type of thing. So like if we saw a traveler's tent later and we used an item on it, it would tell us what that outcome was. So if like we used gold on it this time and it was something good, if we came back to it again in the future at some other dungeon, it'll tell us that gold either did something or it did nothing or whatever the outcome was. But this time we're just gonna check inside of it. Some of the valuables. So we're gonna get gold and a citron. So you can get like other things besides just gold. You can get like
nothing unchecked.
Gemstones.
Found in forgotten places.
And so like you see, as we were walking, our light diminished. So now we have a higher chance of getting it. We have more stress put onto us. We have a higher chance of monster crits. We have a lower chance of dodging. We have a lower chance of scouting. Essentially, scouting is whenever you about to exit a room, I believe, you have a chance to essentially figure out what's in the surrounding area. So like on this map, no, there's only 2 rooms. So scouting doesn't really make any sense. But if there's like 10 rooms here, if we scout, we'll like see what's in the next room, what's along the hallways. So it'll let us better plan out our path to see if we like, oh, we want to avoid a fight that's in a hallway coming up, kind of thing. If we scout it, we can say like, oh, we don't want to fight that kind of thing, or maybe we do, you know, get more loot, whatever. Okay. So let's fight.
Send these vermin a message. The rightful owner has returned.
And as you can see, when he attacked, there was like a little plus symbol in between us that essentially just said that they were doing an area effect over both of us. I will try to... I want to try to kill the guy in the back, because he's the most scary. And also units, enemies specifically, can take up 2 or more spots. So if you have anything that can target in the first spot or the second spot, it can target him. But because of that, he's pushed back essentially to the 3rd spot. So so I'm gonna try to pistol shot him to try to kill him. Essentially how this is there's a guy with a lot of health, and there's one guy in the back who doesn't have a lot of health, but he can deal more damage than this guy. So essentially you want to kill the weaker guy first before you start focusing on the bigger guy. Because if you just focus on the bigger guy, it's going to take a long time, and he's going to get a chance to start dealing damage to us. I'm going to try hit. What's his stun resist? 50%? I will try... Since he cannot target back there, I will use Bulwark of Faith to try to give more protection to myself. And I filled the torch. Yeah, that says torch plus 24. So essentially that allows us to fill up the torch. Normally you have a usable item that you have a limited resource of that allows you to refill the torch by 25, but this allows you, like that was like once per battle, I think, it lets you refill the torch. So it's like an interesting ability, but also marks yourself. It tracks enemies' attacks and takes damage from certain attacks. Like some have extra damage versus marked, like this attack, just plus 25 damage versus marked. Obviously I don't want to attack my own unit, I can't even, but essentially that's the idea behind it. Certain enemies have similar attacks like that.
Maintain the offensive.
And corpses, we don't need to read the tooltip. Essentially whenever somebody dies, they leave a corpse. So if, let's say I killed this guy, his corpse would take up 2 tiles, but this guy in the 3rd row, he would stay in the 3rd row because this guy's corpse was filling up the front row. Essentially how it works is if I killed this guy and I cleared his corpse, this guy in the back, he would shift up to the front. Everybody tries to file into as close into the battle as they can, or close to us. So as a result, corpses essentially make it harder. So if you kill the guys in the front and you can't damage the guys in the back, you have to wait for their corpses to clear, or you have to deal damage to them to clear the corpse. There are abilities, like move abilities, that essentially if you move someone up past the corpse, it'll just destroy the corpse instantaneously. Or there are certain people that can like resurrect corpses, that sort of thing. It's an interesting mechanic to have to deal with. So you're gonna stun him? Nope. Rain of Whips. Sometimes they don't necessarily deal damage, or they deal very little, and like that's a stress. So that dealt 6 stress damage to both my guys, even though it didn't deal any damage to him. So I will try to open veins to try to get some bleed on this guy, and possibly debuff him. So bleed resist is now worse. Not sure if we can stun them. Stunned. Okay. So how stunned works is they skip their turn, and they the stun clears on them, but they get a stun resist for 1 round. So essentially, you can't chain stun someone, or it is quite a bit harder. But when they are stunned, they do take all damage over time abilities, so like bleed. So now that I stacked up more bleed on him, he's gonna take more damage over time, and bleed adds to itself. So it was, whatchamacallit, it was 2 damage over 3 rounds, but then now they're sort of adding on to each other. I will just try a regular attack to try to kill him. And it is also important to know that if someone dies from bleed, they'd have no corpse, or dies from poison or whatever, they have no corpse. I'm just going to continue talking for a second. I believe this is always a trap chest. It's like the same thing in all tutorials. So I'm not going to open it. Like you can leave as soon as you complete the quest, whatever the requirements are, you don't have to clear the whole dungeon. So let's say you're at really low health, but you finish the quest. Let's say you've only completed half the dungeon, but somehow you completed the quest, whatever the requirements for the quest were. You're like, I'm out of here. I don't want to lose any of my units, kind of thing, because they can die. That's the thing. But like this thing, bandage trap chest, something doesn't look quite right about this one. I'm gonna ignore it. It's trapped. It's always trapped. It's always trapped in the tutorial. And so you always get a quest reward. Sometimes it's gold, sometimes it's trinkets. Well, it's almost both all the time, no matter what. And you also get whatever was in your inventory, and sometimes you get heirlooms, which essentially allows, these are the alternative currencies besides just gold that allow you to make permanent upgrades to your home base. Okay, and then after everything, you get to see how much experience they get. We get 2 experience, essentially. That's what's called resolve experience. Essentially, every time they get a higher level, they can get better armor and weapons, as well as they get to improve their skills more. Because essentially, even though they were shown to have 4 skills, there are more. Even though they were shown to have 4 skills, they have more they can choose from, as well as each skill can be individually upgraded. And this shows you how much stress they accrued over the thing. And stress does not go away just passively, I don't believe. You have to manually put them into a process that takes them out for a week, so they can't go on a quest for a week. That allows them to relieve stress. So like they can go gamble, or they can go to like a church thing. I will get to the town when we get to it. But essentially this allows you to have, after every round, you can have good quirks, bad quirks, whatever. Essentially quirks are alterations to this character, like these characters that are not permanent, they're semi-permanent. You can have them go to a place for a week to get rid of a quirk you don't like, or lock in a quirk you do like. So let's say you have a really good quirk that you really do like. There's a possibility that could be changed for a different one. So as a result, you can lock it in, or if there's a bad one, like a really bad one, you want to get rid of, you can also get rid of bad ones. So like this one is consumed by thoughts of inadequacy. Sometimes they're like very not clear on what they do, like this. Sometimes they're extraordinarily clear, like hasty, +3 speed on the first round. So sometimes they're sort of like an esoteric, sort of weird thing. I don't really know. Sometimes it just has weird effects on what they do. And then assassin is +5 crit versus marked. That's a really good one. So essentially he already has one ability that does damage versus marked, but this allows you to like get 5% extra crit chance, I believe. Not crit damage, I believe it's crit chance. I don't believe there's any, unless it specifically says damage on crit or something. I believe just straight when it says +5% crit, I believe that means percentage. So that's a really good skill to have on a guy like this who's called a highwayman. He's called a crusader. There's a bunch of different classes. Okay, let's return to town. So let's go back to the hamlet. This is our home base of operations.
Welcome home.
And this is a lot of stuff to unpack on the screen right now. Okay.
This squalid hamlet, these corrupted lands, they are yours now.
Okay, so this
You are
is
bound to them.
this is our activity log. Essentially, every week you can like look at what you've done in the past weeks. Essentially, what these people did. Here's a quest log for all the things they want you to do in the entire game ever. So this is like an exhaustive list of all the different things you can complete, and you can see the ones you completed this week or in previous weeks. So this will show you all the ones you completed up until now. These are called caretaker goals. And then let's go to this. So now we're in the hamlet. Help me get me on the way. Hold H for, okay, whatever. Okay, so let's start from the bottom and go to the top. Let's explain the stuff on the edges, then we'll get into the hamlet and all the different things. Essentially, gold, obviously, these are the individual things that I was talking about you can sometimes get from quests that let you upgrade different places in here to get like permanent upgrades. These are a DLC item. It's essentially that you buy special items for your units. And this lets you trade, so you can trade 2 of these for 3 of these, or whatever, 3 of these for 1 of these, 2 of these, whatever. The exchange rates are whatever. Okay, I did not want to.
You will know the tragic extent.
Okay. This lets you embark
failings.
into quests and stuff. Here's essentially all the different places we can go normally.
Your work begins.
But we have to explore other regions to unlock. So normally we can go to Ruins, Weald, and Cove, and Warrens. These are the 4 main areas. This is a DLC area. This is the final area that you can actually go to right now. But for now, we're not gonna go there because it requires, or like it's like level 6. But for now, they recommend that we go to this one, or it's really the only one we can go to. That tells you the length of the mission, which essentially means how many campfires you get, and I'll talk about campfires when we get to that later. The difficulty, which is either it's recommended for level 1, level 3, level 5, or level 6. Level 6 is the highest level you can get, but the recommendations are always for 1, 3, or 5. And units usually tend to be, you don't want them to be 2 over or 2 under. And what I mean by 2, I mean TWO, not TOO. So if you try to take a level 4 on this, they just won't go. It'll be too easy for them. But if you had a level 3 and you tried to, or if you had level 5 and you try to take level 2s on it, they'll be too scared. They won't be able to go. So, and the goal for this quest is to explore 90% of rooms, and these are rewards. You get gold crests, which are these, and a trinket. So there's like a bleed stone. It's a common trinket, which is essentially what they call items in this game. It gives a 15% bleed chance skill, or 15% bleed chance, and -1 speed. So most of the stuff in this game are always trade-offs. So there's almost very little things that are strict upgrades, and the things that are strict upgrades tend to be very very specific. So it's not always like the best to just take things that are strict upgrades. Sometimes you have to do trade-offs if you want to have like a really good team. But let's get back to this. This is districts. Essentially, these are alternative buildings to this. They can't be upgraded individually. They just are built once, and they each individually provide a static upgrade. So like one of them is you gain more gold over time or whatever, and it's like you build a bank. Whatever, that's not super important. This is just to get back to this screen. This is the inventory for all the trinkets we've ever collected. This is the glossary, essentially just a series of terms if you don't understand what something means. So like if you didn't know what debuff means, it's a temporary stat. Okay, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll be explaining all the terms. These are obviously the options. These are a roster. Currently we can hold 2 of 10. We have Reynald and Dismas. These are always the 2 characters you start with no matter what. You always have a guy named Reynald, who's a Crusader, and a guy named Dismas, who's a Highwayman. Actually, there's an achievement to beat the game with these 2 people in your final party. It's sort of a badge of honor to be able to bring them from the very first area to the very, very end. And you can sort these by different things. So like the activities. So I was talking about, you can have them de-stress for a week, or you can have them like get rid of their quirks, or lock in their quirks for a week. Sort by class. So if I had a bunch of Crusaders, a bunch of Highwaymen, sort by level of stress, or sort by level. Okay, let's go through these different things. There's Survivalist, there's Stagecoach, Tavern, Sanitarium, Graveyard, Abbey, Guild, Blacksmith, Nomad, Wagon, and Enter Memories. Essentially, Memoirs. Essentially, this one and this one these are just few fallen heroes, not super important.
Up here, covered in the poisoned earth, awaiting merciful oblivion.
Yeah, this is just all the people who've ever died, and this is just you can review different cinematics. You can also, here's all the different enemies and stuff, kind of thing. It's not super important now, at least. Let's look at the Nomad Wagon. Oh, oh God, what? The game just crashed. You're looking at a black screen now. I have no idea what happened. It completely just. Well, I'm gonna pause it and come back.